Welcome to Storytales. Please like this video and subscribe to Storytales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. John Matthews stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, his calloused hands gripping the edge of the marble counter. At 45, the lines around his eyes had deepened, telling stories of both joy and sorrow. His daughter Emily's laughter echoed from downstairs, a sound that never failed to lift his spirits. Even on the darkest days, the master bathroom, like everything else in their modernist mansion, bore his wife Amber's stamp of ostentation. Gold-plated fixtures, imported Italian tiles, and a shower big enough for 4 people. John's lip curled slightly at the thought. Perhaps it had seen such use, given Amber's increasingly brazen behavior, running his hand along the smooth marble counter. John recalled the argument when Amber had insisted on the renovation. "For God's sake, John, we can't have guests seeing a bathroom from the last decade," she'd sneered. "What would my colleagues think?" The renovation had cost more than some of his employees made in a year, but he straightened his tie, a simple navy blue against a crisp white shirt. Unlike Amber's designer wardrobe, his clothes were modest but well-maintained. A lifetime of working with his hands had taught him the value of durability over flash. The sound of heels clicking against hardwood announced his wife's approach before she appeared in the doorway, already dressed in a form-fitting red dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Still wearing that tie. Amber's perfectly painted lips curled into a sneer. She leaned against the doorframe, her posture deliberately provocative. "God, John, do you even try anymore? It's like you want to embarrass me at company functions." John met her gaze in the mirror, his face carefully neutral. Years of dealing with her contempt had taught him to guard his expressions. "I don't attend your functions anymore, Amber. Haven't for months. Right, because you're too busy with your—" Her nose wrinkled, perfectly manicured nails making air quotes, "construction projects. At least someone in this family has to maintain our social standing." She turned away, her designer perfume lingering like a toxic cloud. "Oh, and the housekeeper called in sick. Again. I swear, these people have no work ethic. Call the agency and get a replacement. I can't have the house looking anything less than perfect for my dinner meeting tonight." John watched her leave, noting how she didn't even wait for his response. That was Amber, always demanding, never listening. He'd stopped arguing years ago, realizing it was like trying to reason with a hurricane. A hurricane wrapped in designer labels and artificial charm downstairs. John found Emily at the kitchen island, her textbooks spread out before her. At 18, she was the perfect blend of his quiet strength and her mother's striking features, minus the cruel edge that had come to define Amber's beauty. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her focus intense as she worked through her calculus problems. "Morning, sweetheart," he said, dropping a kiss on top of her head. The scent of her strawberry shampoo reminded him of simpler times, when she was small enough to sit on his shoulders at construction sites, wearing a tiny hard hat he'd bought specially for her. Emily looked up, her warm brown eyes, so like his own, crinkling with genuine affection. "Morning, Dad. I made coffee." She pushed a mug toward him, prepared exactly how he liked it. 2 sugars, splash of cream. She'd been making his coffee since she was 14, insisting it was her way of thanking him for driving her to early morning debate practice. "You're an angel." He savored the first sip, leaning against the counter. The kitchen, despite its magazine-worthy design, felt warm when it was just the two of them. "How's the calculus coming along?" "Pretty good. Mr. Peterson said my last test was the highest in the class." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture that reminded him of her younger self, always slightly shy about her achievements. "That's my girl." Pride swelled in his chest. Despite Amber's constant attempts to mold Emily into her image, their daughter had grown into a thoughtful, kind-hearted young woman. She'd inherited her mother's quick mind, but chose to use it for learning rather than manipulation. The moment was shattered by Amber's sharp voice. "Emily, darling, you're not still obsessing over those grades, are you?" She clicked into the kitchen, checking her reflection in her phone. The screen showed several notifications from names John recognized, all male executives from her company. "Grades won't teach you how to get ahead in life. You should be focusing on making connections, learning how to present yourself." Emily's shoulders tensed slightly. John noticed how she subtly shifted closer to him, a movement that spoke volumes about their family dynamic. I want to get into a good college, Mom. On my own merit. Amber laughed, the sound like breaking glass. Merit? Oh, honey. She set her phone down to fix her already perfect lipstick, her movements deliberately theatrical. Your father's merit got him where? Running a construction company? She gestured around the kitchen. Everything you see here? This lifestyle? This comes from knowing how to play the game. Speaking of which, she grabbed her designer handbag, the red leather matching her dress perfectly. I have a dinner meeting tonight. Don't wait up. Another dinner meeting? John's voice was steady, but his hand tightened around the coffee mug. He'd seen the calendar notifications on their shared home screen. 3 different restaurants, 3 different names. Some of us have actual careers to maintain, John. Amber's smile was razor-sharp as she adjusted her diamond bracelet, a recent business gift she claimed came from a grateful client. Not everyone can clock out at 5 and call it a day. The front door slammed behind her, leaving a weighted silence in the kitchen. Emily reached across the island and squeezed her father's hand. Dad, you okay? John forced a smile, though his daughter's perceptiveness made his heart ache. No 18-year-old should have to comfort their parent about a failing marriage. Always am, kiddo. Don't let her get to you. Your grades matter, and I'm proud of how hard you work. Emily nodded, but her eyes held a wisdom beyond her years. I know what she's doing, you know. At those dinner meetings, people talk at school. Their parents work at her company. Emily. John set down his coffee mug, his protective instincts flaring. It's okay, Dad. I'm not a kid anymore. I see how she treats you, how she acts around other men. She swallowed hard. I don't understand why you stay. The question hung in the air, heavy with years of unspoken pain. John moved around the island and pulled his daughter into a hug. Life's complicated, sweetheart. Sometimes we make choices thinking they're for the best, and then we find ourselves trapped by them. You're not trapped, Emily mumbled against his chest. You're the strongest person I know. You built your company from nothing. You don't need her or her money. John stroked his daughter's hair, remembering how he used to do this when thunderstorms frightened her as a child. Now she was trying to protect him from a different kind of storm. Let's focus on your future, okay? Have you finished your college applications? Emily pulled back, wiping her eyes quickly. Almost. Just need to polish my personal essay. Would you read it when it's done? Of course. He smiled, genuine this time. Now finish your calculus. I need to head to the site soon. As Emily returned to her studies, John moved through the kitchen, preparing his lunch for the day. A simple sandwich, an apple, a bottle of water. His thoughts drifted to the contracts waiting on his desk, the projects that needed his attention. Amber might mock his work, but he'd built something real, something that would last. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows, catching the crystal chandelier Amber had insisted on installing. It cast rainbow patterns across the marble countertops, beautiful but cold, just like their marriage. John packed his lunch in a worn brown bag, ignoring the designer lunchboxes Amber had bought and never used. I'm heading out, he called to Emily. Text me if you need anything. Love you, Dad. Emily's voice carried the warmth their home so often lacked. Love you too, kiddo. As John grabbed his keys from the hook by the door, solid brass, another of Amber's essential upgrades, he caught his reflection in the entryway mirror. The man looking back at him was solid, dependable, perhaps too accepting of life's injustices. But something was changing in those eyes, a hardening around the edges that spoke of patience wearing thin. But he stepped out into the morning air, the weight of his wedding ring feeling heavier than usual. Soon he would be at his construction site, surrounded by people who respected him for his abilities rather than his wife's connections. For now, that would have to be enough, but as he started his truck, the same reliable vehicle he'd driven for years despite Amber's complaints about its embarrassing appearance, John couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. The careful balance he'd maintained for so long was shifting, like soil before a landslide, and when it finally gave way, he would be ready. The construction site hummed with activity as John's truck pulled up to the temporary office trailer. Heavy machinery moved across the partially completed foundation like prehistoric beasts, their diesel engines punctuating the morning air. This was his element, a place where actions spoke louder than words, where results couldn't be manipulated with a smile and a well-placed compliment. Mike Rodriguez, his site foreman of 12 years, waited by the trailer steps with 2 cups of coffee from the food truck that parked nearby. He handed one to John as he approached. "Morning, boss. Concrete's running late again. Supplier issues?" John accepted the coffee, noting how different it tasted from the expensive imported beans Amber stocked their home with. This coffee tasted like work, like early mornings and honest labor. "Yeah." Their dispatcher said something about equipment failure. Mike scratched his gray-streaked beard. "Thing is, I called my cousin who works there. Real story is they oversold their morning pours. Trying to juggle too many jobs." John nodded, already pulling out his phone. "Let me handle it." He dialed a number from memory, walking a few steps away. The conversation was brief, direct. No manipulation, no games, just straight talk between professionals who understood the value of reputation. When he returned, Mike raised an eyebrow. "Well, they'll be here in 30 minutes. Had to remind them about that school project we did for them last summer. How we rushed their timeline when they needed it." John took a sip of coffee. Sometimes people just need a reminder that business is about relationships, not just transactions. Mike grinned. "That's why we stick around, boss. You treat people right. They remember it." Together they walked the site, checking progress, addressing concerns. John stopped the talk with every crew, knowing each worker by name. He asked about Carlos's newborn daughter, congratulated Raj on his son's college acceptance, discussed Tom's concerns about a tricky bit of infrastructure work near the eastern edge of the site. They paused to review the blueprint modifications. A young worker, Kevin, fresh out of trade school, approached hesitantly. "Mr. Matthews? Got a minute?" "Always. What's on your mind?" Kevin shifted his weight, hard hat in hands. "It's about the apprenticeship program. I know the deadline's passed, but my sister, she's really interested. She's got experience with CAD from her community college classes, and—" "Bring her by tomorrow," John interrupted gently. "Deadline's just a guideline. Talent and dedication matter more than paperwork." The young man's face lit up. "Really? Thank you, sir. She'll be here first thing, I promise." As Kevin hurried back to his crew, Mike chuckled. "Your wife would have a fit if she saw you breaking policy like that." John's expression hardened slightly. "Amber's policies are about control. Mine are about building buildings, yes, but also people, communities." He gestured at the site around them. "Everyone here has a story about someone giving them a chance. I'm just paying it forward." The morning progressed steadily. John moved between meetings with suppliers, consultations with engineers, and hands-on problem-solving with his crews. Around noon, his phone buzzed with a text from Emily. "Got an A on my calc test. Thought you want to know." He smiled, typing back, "Never doubted you for a second. Proud of you, kiddo." Another buzz followed quickly. "Mom's been calling the house." "Sounds weird. Just FYI." John's jaw tightened. He checked his messages. 3 missed calls from Amber. No voicemail. Typical. She hated leaving messages, preferred to keep people guessing about her demands. "Everything okay?" Mike asked, noticing his expression. "Yeah, just—" John shook his head. "Family stuff." Mike had known John long enough to read between the lines. "You know, boss, my sister went through something similar. Guy seemed perfect on paper, successful, wealthy, all that. Turned out money was his religion, and manipulation was his hobby. How'd she handle it? Finally realized her worth wasn't tied to his opinion. Walked away, rebuilt her life. These days she runs her own business, raised 2 great kids." Mike paused. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is admit something's broken beyond repair. John stared at the construction site before them. Here, broken things could be fixed with the right tools, the right approach. But some breaks went deeper than surface cracks, spread through foundations until the whole structure was compromised. His phone buzzed again, another missed call from Amber. He silenced it, turning instead to review the afternoon schedule. There was comfort in work, in tangible progress, and measurable results. After lunch, John led a site safety meeting. Standing before his crews, he emphasized the importance of communication, of looking out for each other. "We're only as strong as our weakest link," he reminded them. "If you see something wrong, speak up. If someone needs help, offer it. We're building more than structures here. We're building trust." The irony of his words wasn't lost on him. How many years had he stayed silent at home, watching Amber's behavior grow more outrageous, more destructive? How long had he convinced himself that keeping quiet was protecting Emily? The afternoon brought a visit from city inspectors. John walked them through the site, answering questions, providing documentation. His meticulous record-keeping impressed them. Every decision, every modification carefully documented and justified. "Wish all our sites were this organized," the lead inspector commented. "Your reputation for integrity is well-deserved, Mr. Matthews." Integrity. The word followed John as he continued his rounds. Amber would have laughed at it, seen it as a weakness to be exploited. But here, among people who built things meant to last, integrity was the foundation everything else rested on. Around 4. Another text from Emily arrived. Mom called again. Said she's having dinner with clients tonight. Multiple locations? John's hands gripped his phone tightly. The lies were becoming more blatant, as if Amber was daring him to confront her. She'd grown so confident in his passivity that she didn't even bother hiding her tracks anymore. Mike approached with some paperwork, then stopped short at John's expression. "You know what my old man used to say? The longer you let someone walk all over you, the more surprised they are when you finally stand up. Your old man was a wise man. Yeah, well, he also said sometimes you have to tear something down to build it, right?" Mike handed over the papers. "Just saying." As the day wound down, John found himself in the trailer, reviewing project timelines. His phone had stopped buzzing. Amber had probably moved on to more entertaining company. The thought should have hurt more than it did. Instead, he felt a strange sense of clarity, like watching storm clouds gather on the horizon. Then he picked up a framed photo from his desk, him and Emily at her debate team finals last year. She stood tall, proud, clutching her trophy. Amber hadn't attended, claiming a last-minute business emergency. Later, John had seen photos on social media of her at a rooftop bar with a group of executives. That a knock at the trailer door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in?" It was Lisa from accounting, looking concerned. "Mr. Matthews? Sorry to bother you, but I noticed something odd in the invoices from the Riverside project. Some of the materials costs seem inflated, and when I called to verify—" "Show me," John said, sliding into work mode. This was what he was good at: solving problems, uncovering discrepancies, setting things right. As Lisa laid out the paperwork, pointing out inconsistencies, John's mind worked with practiced efficiency. Here was something he could fix, a wrong he could right. The sensation was almost refreshing after years of helplessness at home. "Good catch, Lisa. Let's dig deeper into this." He began making notes, documenting everything. Someone had tried to play games with numbers, thinking no one would notice. They were about to learn the same lesson Amber needed to learn. Underestimating people's attention to detail was a dangerous mistake. The sun was setting by the time John finished at the site. He sat in his truck, watching the day crew leave as the night security arrived. His phone showed more missed calls from Amber, a text about her dinner plans changing. More lies, more manipulation, more disrespect. Something had to give. And soon as he started his truck, John thought about Emily's text messages, about Mike's words of wisdom, about the simple truth of building things that last. He thought about integrity, about foundations, about the difference between fixing something broken and knowing when to start over. The drive home felt different somehow, charged with possibility. Maybe it was time to apply his professional principles to his personal life. After all, every project began the same way, by clearing the ground and laying a new foundation, and John Matthews knew everything there was to know about building from the ground up. Evening shadows stretched across John's home office as he reviewed contract proposals. The house held the peculiar silence that always seemed to settle in during Amber's absences, a silence that felt more like peace than emptiness. Through his open door, he could hear Emily in her room, probably working on homework or college applications. The quiet domesticity of the moment almost made him forget the storm brewing beneath their home's perfectly maintained surface. His laptop screen showed an email from his company's legal team about a supplier dispute. Simple, straightforward problems with clear solutions. Nothing like the complexity of his personal life. A soft knock at his door drew his attention. "Dad?" Emily stood in the doorway, laptop in hand. "Could you look at my personal essay? I think it's finally ready." "Of course, come in." John cleared space on his desk as Emily settled into the chair opposite him. She passed over her laptop, and he began to read. The essay was everything Amber would have hated. Honest, thoughtful, focused on personal growth rather than achievement. Emily had written about learning the value of integrity from watching her father build his business, about understanding that true success came from lifting others up rather than stepping on them. "This is excellent, sweetheart." John's voice carried genuine pride. "Though your mother might have different opinions about the message." Emily's smile held a touch of defiance. "Good thing she's too busy with her dinner meetings to read it then." A comfortable silence fell between them as John made a few minor suggestions. The moment was interrupted by the sound of a car pulling into the driveway, the distinctive purr of Amber's luxury sedan. "That's earlier than usual," Emily remarked, checking the time. It was barely 9 o'clock. The front door opened with more force than necessary, followed by the uneven click of heels on marble. Amber's laugh, too loud, slightly slurred, echoed through the house. "Emily? Emily, darling, come down here. Mommy has some wisdom to share." John rose from his desk, a knot forming in his stomach. Through the crack in his office door, he watched Emily emerge from her room, wearing pajamas and looking wary. "Mom? Are you okay?" "Never better, sweetie." Amber's voice was too bright, too sharp. She stumbled slightly, catching herself on the banister. Her designer dress was slightly askew, her perfectly styled hair showing signs of activity. "Come down here. We need to have a mother-daughter chat about life's realities." Emily descended the stairs slowly, casting a glance toward John's office. He remained still, every muscle tense as he listened. Years of construction work had taught him that sometimes the most important information came from watching and waiting. "Oh my God, what are you wearing?" Amber's voice dripped with disdain. "You look like a child. Come here. Let me tell you about my evening. About how the real world works." John moved closer to his door, his jaw clenching as Amber's voice carried up the stairs. From his position, he could see both of them clearly. Emily, standing straight but uncertain, and Amber, swaying slightly as she gestured with practiced drama. "You see this necklace?" Amber touched the glittering diamonds at her throat. $18,000. A gift from Richard in marketing. She smirked, running her fingers along the stones. "And this bracelet? From Stephen in legal. Men are so easy to manipulate, darling. You just have to know which buttons to push." "Mom, I don't—" "Listen to me." Amber's voice took on an edge, her perfectly manicured hand gripping Emily's arm. "Your father's way, this whole integrity thing, it gets you nowhere. You want to know what real power feels like?" She laughed, the sound ugly and triumphant. "I had 3 men eating out of my hand tonight. 3. And each one thinks he's special." John's hands had curled into fists, his knuckles white. The wood of his office door creaked under his grip. "That's horrible." Emily's voice was quiet but firm, trying to pull away from her mother's grasp. "Those men probably have families. And Dad, oh please, your father." Amber scoffed, releasing Emily's arm to gesture dismissively. "He's the most boring man alive. No ambition, no fire. Just his little construction projects and his sad little principles." Her lip curled in contempt. "Do you want to end up like that? Working your fingers to the bone for scraps when you could have everything?" Emily took a step back, her voice stronger now. "Dad's not boring. He's good and honest and good? Honest?" Amber's voice rose mockingly, echoing off the high ceilings she'd insisted on during their last renovation. "Those are words people use to make themselves feel better about being mediocre. Look at me, Emily. Really look." She spun in place, almost losing her balance. "Designer everything, executive position, men falling all over themselves to please me. That's power. That's success." She grabbed Emily's shoulders, forcing eye contact. "And I got it all by understanding one simple truth. Morality is for the weak." John watched as Emily twisted away from her mother's grip, tears beginning to form in her eyes. His daughter's voice trembled but held firm. "You're drunk, Mom. And you're wrong. About everything. Wrong." Amber laughed again, wobbling on her heels as she reached for her phone. "I just closed a 7-figure deal, baby. And not because of my business acumen, if you know what I mean." She winked, the gesture grotesque in its implications. That's what I'm trying to teach you. Your body, your youth, their assets. Use them. She began scrolling through her phone, showing Emily messages that made his daughter recoil. These men, they're all the same. Flash a little skin, stroke their ego, and they'll give you anything you want. I've got them so wrapped around my finger. They don't even care that I'm sleeping with all of them. The words echoed in the marble foyer, bouncing off the expensive walls Amber had insisted on, paid for with money that John now knew came from more than just her executive salary. Mom, stop. Please. Emily's voice cracked. I don't want to hear this. Of course you don't. You're just like your father. Amber's voice dripped with contempt. So concerned with right and wrong. So naive about how the world really works. Well, let me tell you something, sweetheart. While you and your father are clutching your precious morals, I'm out there taking what I want. And I'm winning. John had heard enough. Something inside him, something that had been bending for years under the weight of Amber's cruelty and contempt, finally snapped. He stepped back from the door, his mind suddenly crystal clear. Emily fled upstairs, her quiet sobs cutting through him like knives. Amber's drunken laughter followed, along with the sound of her stumbling toward the kitchen. Probably in search of more alcohol, John moved to his desk and opened his laptop, beginning a new document. His hands were steady as he typed, years of maintaining detailed project records, serving him well as he began documenting everything he'd just witnessed. Every word, every admission, every attempt to corrupt their daughter, all of it recorded with the same precision he brought to his construction projects that a soft knock at his door pulled him from his work. Dad, come in, sweetheart. Emily's eyes were red-rimmed, but her chin was set in a determined line that reminded him of himself. I'm sorry about Mom. What she said, none of that is your fault. John stood, pulling his daughter into a tight hug. And none of what she said is true. Success built on hurting others isn't success at all. I know. Emily's voice was muffled against his shoulder. I don't want to be like her. Ever. You won't be. John's voice was firm. You're stronger than she is, better than she could ever understand. But Emily, he pulled back slightly, meeting her eyes. Things are going to change around here. I need you to trust me. I do trust you. The words were immediate, unwavering. What are you going to do? John glanced at his laptop screen, at the growing evidence of years of betrayal and manipulation. I'm going to remind your mother that karma has a way of catching up to people, and I'm going to make sure she never hurts you again. Emily nodded, a mix of relief and determination crossing her face. Good. Do you need any help? No, sweetheart. This is my battle to fight. You focus on your studies, on becoming the amazing woman I know you're going to be. Let me handle your mother. After Emily left, John returned to his work with renewed purpose. In the quiet of his office, surrounded by the evidence of Amber's betrayal, he began crafting a plan that would strip away everything she valued. Her power, her reputation, her carefully constructed image of success. She thought him weak because he chose kindness. Boring because he valued integrity. She'd never understood that his quiet nature wasn't a weakness. It was a choice. A choice he was now choosing to unmake. As he worked through the night, the sound of Amber's occasional drunken laughter drifting through the walls. John felt no anger, no hatred. Only a cold, clear certainty. She had brought this on herself. With every cruel word, every betrayal, every attempt to corrupt their daughter, now she would learn that karma wasn't just a concept. Sometimes it had a name, and sometimes it had been sleeping under your roof, watching, waiting, and keeping receipts. John saved his work and shut down his laptop as the first rays of dawn began to creep through his office window. In a few hours, Amber would wake up, hungover but unrepentant, never suspecting that her carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down around her. He allowed himself a small, grim smile. Let her think him weak for one more day. Soon enough, she'd understand exactly who she'd been underestimating all these years, and by then, it would be far too late. The morning after Amber's drunken revelations, John sat in his office at the construction site, his mind clear despite the sleepless night. He'd called in his most trusted employee, Mike Rodriguez, earlier than usual. The situation required a different kind of construction. the dismantling of Amber's carefully built facade. "You're here early, boss," Mike said, settling into the chair across from John's desk. His weathered face showed concern. "Everything okay?" John leaned forward, his voice steady. "I need your help with something, Mike. Something off the books. Whatever you need." Mike's response was immediate. 15 years of friendship had built the kind of trust that didn't need explanations. "I want to hire Thomas Chun." Mike's eyebrows shot up. "The forensic accountant? The one who helped bust that corruption ring last year?" "The same." John pulled out a file. "I've been tracking some inconsistencies in my personal accounts. Things that don't add up with Amber's spending." "About time," Mike muttered, then caught himself. "Sorry, boss. We've all seen how she treats you." John's lips tightened. "Last night, she came home drunk. Tried to teach my daughter her tricks for manipulating men. Bragged about sleeping with multiple executives for deals." "Jesus Christ." Mike's face darkened. "Emily okay?" "She's strong. Stronger than I've been." John opened his laptop. "But strength isn't enough anymore. I need evidence. Proof. The kind that holds up in court." A knock at the trailer door interrupted them. "Come in." John called. Lisa from accounting entered, carrying a stack of papers. "Mr. Matthews, I found something else about those irregular invoices." She paused, seeing Mike. "Should I come back later?" "No, stay." John gestured to another chair. "You might be able to help with this, too. Tell me what you found." Lisa spread the papers on his desk. "I've been cross-referencing company expenses with project budgets. There's a pattern of inflated costs, but they're clever about it. Small enough amounts to fly under the radar, spread across multiple projects." "How long?" John asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Started about 6 months ago." Lisa pointed to a highlighted section. "Right after Mrs. Matthews helped us land that government contract." Mike let out a low whistle. "She's been skimming from your own company?" "Not directly." John's voice was cold. "She's too smart for that. But I bet if we dig deeper, we'll find connections between these irregular charges and certain vendors she recommended." "That's not all," Lisa continued, pulling out another document. "I found some interesting email exchanges. Mrs. Matthews has been using company resources for personal expenses, coding them as business meetings." John nodded slowly. "Those dinner meetings of hers. Multiple restaurants, same night," Lisa confirmed. "All billed to different project accounts." The office fell silent as the implications sunk in. John stood, moving to the window that overlooked his construction site. Workers were arriving, ready for another day of honest labor. The contrast wasn't lost on him. "Here's what we're going to do," he said, turning back to face them. "Lisa, I want you to compile everything you found. Every irregular charge, every suspicious vendor, every misclassified expense. Mike, reach out to Thomas Chun. Tell him it's urgent." "What about the rest of the management team?" Mike asked. "Keep this quiet for now. The smaller the circle, the better." Lisa gathered her papers, hesitating. "Mr. Matthews, there's something else you should know. Mrs. Matthews has been asking for access to our new project management system. Says she needs it for client relations." John's jaw tightened. "When?" "She called yesterday. Was quite insistent about it. Deny the request. Cite security protocols." John's voice held no room for argument. "And Lisa, thank you for paying attention." After they left, John pulled out his phone. A text from Emily waited. "Mom's still sleeping. Missed her morning meetings. Her phone keeps buzzing." He texted back, "Stay at Jessica's house tonight. I'll explain later." The response was immediate. "Already planned to. Love you, Dad." John spent the morning making calls, laying groundwork. His construction experience had taught him the importance of proper preparation. You couldn't build something strong by rushing the foundation around noon. His office phone rang. The caller ID showed Amber's office number. "John Matthews." "John, darling." Amber's voice held its usual condescending tone, though slightly strained. "Hangover, probably. Why is your accounting department giving me trouble about system access?" "Security protocols, Amber. You know how it is. Don't be difficult. I need to review some numbers for the board meeting." John watched a crane lift steel beams into place through his window. "Funny you should mention numbers. I've been reviewing some myself." A pause. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You sound tired, Amber." Rough night? I don't have time for your passive-aggressive little games. Her voice sharpened. I need that access. No. Excuse me? I said no. John's voice remained calm. And Amber? You might want to check your credit cards. There seems to be some issue with the accounts. He hung up before she could respond, then turned to his computer. Time to make some more calls. The demolition of Amber's world needed to be methodical, precise. Like any controlled demolition, it required careful planning and perfect timing. His phone buzzed again. Amber. He let it go to voicemail. She'd gotten used to him jumping at her command, solving her problems, smoothing things over. That ended now. A message from Thomas Chin arrived. Can meet today. 2 p.m. Usual place? John confirmed the meeting, then opened his project planning software. Time to start a new file. The most important project of his life needed proper documentation that he named it simply, Karma. The Corner Cup Cafe sat 3 blocks from John's main construction site, its worn brick exterior a stark contrast to the sleek restaurants Amber preferred. Thomas Chin already occupied a corner booth when John arrived, a laptop and several folders spread before him. Mr. Matthews. Thomas stood, offering a firm handshake. Mike, fill me in on the basics. Shall we? He gestured to the seat across from him. John settled in, noting how Thomas had chosen a spot that gave them privacy while maintaining a clear view of both exits. Thanks for meeting on short notice. Your timing is interesting. Thomas opened one of his folders. I just finished reviewing some similar cases. Corporate fraud often has a personal component, like executives using company funds for affairs. John's voice was steady. Thomas's eyes sharpened. Exactly like that. Show me what you have so far. John pulled out his own files. Bank statements, credit card records, emails he'd archived over the years. My wife's been careful, but lately she's gotten sloppy. Overconfident. They usually do. Thomas began sorting through the documents. Successfully getting away with something for a long time breeds complacency. Tell me about these dinner meetings. For the next hour, they pieced together a pattern. Amber's business dinners often involved multiple restaurants in one night, each billed to different project accounts. Hotel charges appeared under various vendor names. Gift purchases were coded as client appreciation items. She's not just cheating on you, Thomas concluded, pointing to a spreadsheet. She's defrauding your company and possibly her own. These expense patterns suggest she's been manipulating project bids, possibly taking kickbacks. Can you prove it? With some digging, Thomas typed rapidly on his laptop. But there's something else? Look at these timestamps. The nights she's claiming business expenses at hotels. They match up with major contract signings at her company. John's phone buzzed Amber again. He silenced it as Thomas continued. If she's trading sexual favors for contracts, that's not just fraud. That's corporate espionage, potentially even blackmail, depending on how she's leveraging the information. I need everything documented, John said. Every charge, every meeting, every connection. It'll take time to build a solid case. Thomas glanced up from his laptop. And it won't be cheap. Money's not an issue. John's voice hardened. Just make it thorough. Their meeting was interrupted by John's phone ringing again, this time from his office. Mr. Matthews? Lisa's voice was tense. Your wife is here. She's demanding access to the system files. John could hear Amber's voice in the background, sharp and angry. I'll be right there. Don't give her access to anything. The drive back to his office took less than 5 minutes. He found Amber in the reception area, dressed in one of her power suits, radiating controlled fury. Finally, she snapped as he approached. Tell your little accountant to stop stonewalling me. My office. John's tone made it clear this wasn't a request. He led the way, noting how Amber's heels clicked aggressively against the floor the moment the door closed. She rounded on him. What kind of game are you playing, John? I need those files for my board meeting. No, you don't. He moved behind his desk, remaining standing. You need them because you're trying to cover your tracks. Amber's laugh held a note of disbelief. Excuse me? Have you lost your mind? 3 restaurants last night, Amber. 3 different project accounts. Want to explain that? Her expression flickered for just a moment before her mask of confidence returned. Business development requires flexibility. Something you wouldn't understand with your Limited perspective. Limited? John's smile didn't reach his eyes. Tell me about Richard in marketing. Or was it Stephen in legal last night? I lose track of your rotation. Amber's face paled slightly before anger took over. You were spying on me? Didn't have to. You announced it yourself. Rather proudly, in fact, right before you try to teach our daughter how to whore herself out for success. The slap echoed in the office. John didn't flinch, didn't move to touch his reddening cheek. He just watched as Amber's composure cracked further. How dare you, she hissed. Everything I've done has been for this family's success. Every contract, every deal, every man you've slept with. John's voice was ice. Every dollar you've stolen? Stolen? Amber laughed, but it held an edge of panic. You can't steal what you've earned. This lifestyle you enjoy, the connections I've built, I haven't touched your money in years, Amber. My company, my work, that's what pays our bills. Your contributions have mainly been in the form of embarrassment and corruption. She took a step back, studying him as if seeing him for the first time. You've changed? No. John sat down, his movements deliberate. I'll just stop pretending. Now get out of my office. And Amber? Cancel your credit cards. All of them. You can't do that. Those are joint accounts. We're joint accounts. He turned to his computer. Amazing what you can accomplish with a phone call and proof of fraudulent activity. Amber's composure finally shattered. You stupid, small-minded man. Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? The connections I have? The men you're sleeping with, you mean? John looked up, his expression cold. Yes, I know exactly who I'm dealing with. The question is, do you? She grabbed her purse, hands shaking slightly. This isn't over. You're right about that. John returned to his work, dismissing her. Give my regards to the board. I'm sure they'll be very interested in your networking techniques. The door slammed behind her hard enough to rattle the windows. Through the glass walls of his office, John saw Lisa and Mike watching Amber storm out, their expressions a mix of concern and satisfaction. His phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. Started digging. Found something interesting in her company's contract records. Can meet again tomorrow? John replied with a confirmation, then opened his project planning software. The file named Karma was growing. Each piece of evidence another nail in the coffin of Amber's carefully constructed world. That a knock at his door announced Mike's arrival. Boss, you okay? Better than okay. John gestured to the chair across from him. Tell me something. How many of our suppliers has Amber recommended over the years? Mike's expression turned thoughtful. At least half a dozen. All of them charging premium rates for standard materials. Give me their contact information. All of them. John opened a new document. Time to start making some calls. What are you looking for? Patterns? John's smile was grim. People like Amber, they never work alone. They build networks, create systems of mutual benefit and blackmail. Pull one thread, and the whole thing unravels, Mike finished. Wanting to get the project managers in on this? Not yet, but tell Lisa to keep digging through those invoices. I want every irregular charge. Every suspicious payment flagged. After Mike left, John stood at his office window, watching the construction site below. Workers moved with purpose, each knowing their role in the larger project. That's what this was, a project. The demolition of Amber's empire required the same attention to detail as any other job. His phone buzzed with another text, this time from Emily. Mom just called. She sounds scared. What did you do? Nothing yet, he replied. Just reminded her that actions have consequences. Good. Jessica's mom says I can stay all week if needed. John smiled at his daughter's message. Emily had grown up watching him build things, learning that proper preparation was key to any successful project. She understood what was coming, turning back to his computer. John began organizing the growing evidence. Amber had spent years building her web of lies and manipulation. Now he would take it apart, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but the truth she'd tried so hard to hide, and he was just getting started. 3 days into his investigation, John sat across from Thomas Chen in his office, reviewing the mounting evidence. The morning sun cast long shadows across stacks of documents. Bank statements, hotel receipts, contract bids, and email printouts. It's worse than we thought, Thomas said, turning his laptop screen toward John. Your wife hasn't just been trading favors for contracts. She's been selling company secrets. John leaned forward, studying the email chains Thomas had uncovered. Explain. These messages are coded, but not very subtly. She's been feeding information about her company's bids to competitors, then using her influence to ensure her company's bids come in just under theirs. Getting kickbacks from both sides, John concluded. Exactly. Thomas pulled up another document. But here's where it gets interesting. One of the executives she's been sleeping with, he started getting sloppy too. Left a paper trail of fund transfers to offshore accounts. A knock interrupted them. Mike entered looking grim. Boss, you need to see this. One of our suppliers just called. Said Mrs. Matthews contacted them last night. Tried to pressure them into altering some old invoices. Put them on speaker. John ordered. Mike dialed, and a nervous voice filled the room. Mr. Matthews? This is David from Superior Materials. David, tell me exactly what happened. Your wife called around midnight. Said there might be some discrepancies in our past invoices that needed adjusting. Offered a substantial bonus if we could correct them before any audits. And what did you tell her? Nothing, sir. Said I need to review and get back to her. But David hesitated. She wasn't happy. Started making threats about future contracts, about connections she has in the industry. Send me everything, John said. Every communication, every altered invoice request. And David? You did the right thing. After ending the call, John turned to Thomas. Time to move this up a level. The anonymous tip to her company? Yes. John opened his laptop. But first, I need to make some calls. Over the next hour, John contacted key people he'd cultivated relationships with over the years. Banking executives, industry regulators, even a journalist who'd covered corporate fraud cases. Each call was brief, precise, laying groundwork for what was to come. His office phone rang Amber's number. He put it on speaker. You think you're clever, don't you? Her voice dripped venom. Having your lackeys spy on me, turning my contacts against me? Funny thing about honest business practices, Amber. People respect them. Oh, please. You're just jealous. Always have been. Watching me succeed while you play with your little construction toys. Is that what you call sleeping with half your company's executive board? Success? A sharp intake of breath. You have no proof of anything. Don't I? John's voice remained calm. Tell me, does the board know about your offshore accounts? Or how about those altered bid documents? Silence stretched for a moment. When Amber spoke again, her voice had lost some of its edge. What do you want? Nothing. That's what you never understood, Amber. I don't want anything from you. Never did. Then why are you doing this? Because actions have consequences. Even for people like you who think they're above them. The line went dead. John looked at Thomas. Send it? Thomas nodded, typing quickly. The anonymous tip to Amber's company's ethics department went out, complete with carefully selected evidence of her misconduct. Enough to trigger an investigation, but not enough to show their full hand. How long? Mike asked. In my experience, Thomas closed his laptop. With this kind of evidence? Within hours. They didn't have to wait that long. Barely 40 minutes later, John's phone lit up with a text from Emily. Mom just got called into an emergency board meeting. She's freaking out? Stay at Jessica's, he replied. Things might get messy. The response came quickly. Already planned to. Dad, be careful. She's making calls screaming about revenge. Let her try. John turned to Mike. Increase security at all our sites. Change the access codes. Already done. Mike paused. What about your house? Changed the locks yesterday. Set up new security cameras too. Thomas gathered his documents. I'll keep digging. Something tells me we've just scratched the surface. After they left, John stood at his window, watching his crews work below. His phone buzzed constantly, message after message from Amber, alternating between threats and attempts at manipulation. He let them pile up. Unread around noon, his office door burst open. Amber stormed in, her designer outfit slightly disheveled, her usual perfect composure cracking. What did you do? She demanded, slamming her hands on his desk. The board just suspended me pending an investigation. John looked up calmly. Sounds serious. This is your fault. You sent them something, didn't you? Why would I do that? John's voice was maddeningly steady. I'm just a boring construction worker, remember? No ambition, no understanding of real business. Stop playing games. Amber's voice rose hysterically. They're talking about criminal charges, John. Criminal charges? Fascinating how quickly karma works sometimes, isn't it? She stepped back, really looking at him for perhaps the first time in years. You've been planning this. All this time, playing the quiet, accepting husband. No, Amber. I just finally stopped accepting the unacceptable. He stood his height, making her take another step back. You tried to corrupt our daughter. I tried to teach her how the real world works. The world you created, you mean? Where everything's for sale, where loyalty means nothing, where success is measured by how many people you can betray. John's voice never raised, but each word hit like a hammer. That world's ending, Amber, and you built its destruction yourself. One lie at a time. Her composure cracked completely. You can't do this to me. I'll ruin you. I'll tell everyone. What? That you've been sleeping with multiple executives for contracts? That you've been stealing from both our companies? That you tried to pressure suppliers into falsifying documents? John smiled coldly. Go ahead. I'm sure the board would love to hear more details. Amber's phone buzzed. The color drained from her face as she read the message. They're seizing my office. Downloading my emails. Better hurry back then. Wouldn't want them finding anything. Compromising. She moved to leave, then turned back, her voice shaking with rage. This isn't over. You're right. John sat back down, dismissing her. It's just beginning. After she left, John picked up his phone. Time to make one more call to his lawyer. The evidence they gathered would work just as well in divorce court as it did in a corporate investigation. His phone buzzed with another text from Emily. Mom's car just raced past Jessica's house. She looked scared. Good, John replied. Stay safe. I love you. He opened his project file, adding notes about Amber's visit. The foundation of her world was crumbling, exactly as planned. Soon, the whole structure would collapse, leaving nothing but the ruins of her carefully constructed lies, and John Matthews, the man she dismissed as boring and weak, would be there to watch it fall. The corporate investigation into Amber's activities moved with surprising speed. Within days, John's anonymous tip had triggered an avalanche of revelations. He watched it unfold from his office, where Thomas Chun provided regular updates on the chaos engulfing Amber's carefully constructed world. Her executive lovers are turning on each other, Thomas reported, scrolling through his tablet, each trying to save himself by exposing the others. It's getting ugly. John looked up from his desk. How ugly? Richard from marketing just submitted a full confession to the board. Included some rather explicit emails and photos. Stephen from legal is threatening to sue for harassment. Thomas paused. There's also talk of criminal charges. The SEC is getting involved. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mike entered, looking grimmer than usual. Boss, you need to see this. Amber's at the front gate, demanding to be let in. John checked the security feed on his computer. Amber's luxury car was parked haphazardly at the construction site's entrance, blocking deliveries. She stood outside it, her usual polished appearance notably disheveled. Let her in, John decided, but call security to stand by. They watched on the cameras as Amber's car sped through the site, barely missing a stack of steel beams. She parked crooked across two spaces and stormed toward the office trailer, stumbling slightly in her designer heels. Want us to stay? Mike asked. No, but keep security close. The door flew open moments later. Amber burst in, her face flushed with rage and what looked like several drinks' worth of liquid courage. Happy now, she snarled, throwing a folder on his desk. My resignation letter. Forced resignation, thanks to you. John picked up the folder calmly. Seems like the board made their own decision. Their decision? Amber laughed hysterically. They're cowards, all of them, running scared because of some anonymous tip and a few compromising emails. A few. John raised an eyebrow. From what I hear, Richard's confession was quite comprehensive. Her face went pale. You know about Richard? I know everything, Amber. Every man, every deal, every dollar you stole. He leaned back in his chair. Did you really think you could hide it forever? Hide what? Being successful? Making things happen? She gripped the edge of his desk. You never understood how business really works. Sometimes you have to sleep your way through the executive board, steal from your own company, compromise your integrity and everyone around you. Integrity? She spat the word. Integrity doesn't pay for designer clothes or luxury cars or, my integrity built this company. John cut in, his voice sharp. Built it strong enough to support your excessive lifestyle, your endless spending, your constant need to prove your worth through material things. Don't you dare lecture me about worth. While you were playing with dirt and concrete, I was making real money, building real connections. Connections that just threw you under the bus to save themselves. John stood slowly. How's that working out for you? Amber's composure cracked further. They can't do this to me. I made them. Without me, their pathetic little careers would be nothing. And now they're nothing to you. Funny how karma works? She reached for his computer monitor. I'll show you karma. The door opened, and 2 security guards stepped in. Everything okay, Mr. Matthews? Mrs. Matthews was just leaving. John's voice was ice. Weren't you, Amber? She straightened, trying to gather her remaining dignity. This isn't over, John. You have no idea what I'm capable of. Actually, I do. That's why this is happening. He nodded to the guards. Escort her out, and make sure she doesn't take anything that doesn't belong to her. As they led her away, her threats echoed down the hallway. John turned to his computer, pulling up his email. Time to contact his lawyer again. His phone buzzed Emily. Mom just called me, crying and screaming. Said you ruined her life. Are you okay? He texted back. I'm fine. She's the one who ruined everything. Jessica's mom overheard the call. She's a lawyer and says Mom could face serious charges. John was composing a response when his office phone rang. The caller ID showed Amber's company's general counsel. Mr. Matthews, this is Patricia Morrison from legal. We need to discuss your wife's activities involving your company's contracts. Of course. I've been gathering documentation you might find interesting. We've already found quite a bit. Patricia's voice was professional but strained. The board would appreciate your discretion while we handle this internally. My discretion comes with conditions, John replied. I want a full audit of every project she touched, every contract she influenced. That could take weeks. Then I suggest you get started. Oh, and Patricia, you might want to check the offshore accounts registered to shell companies in the Caymans. The transaction dates correspond interestingly with certain contract awards. Silence on the line. How did you? I pay attention. Something your executives should have done years ago. After hanging up, John opened his project file. The one labeled Karma had grown substantially. Each piece of evidence, another nail in the coffin of Amber's career. His phone rang again, Amber's number. He let it go to voicemail, then played the message on speaker. You think you've won? This is just the beginning, John. I still have friends, connections you don't know about. I'll destroy everything you've built. He deleted the message mid-rant. Empty threats from a cornered animal. Mike knocked and entered. Boss? Thomas found something else. About those offshore accounts. Show me? The evidence kept mounting, each revelation worse than the last. Amber's carefully constructed empire wasn't just crumbling. It was imploding spectacularly, taking down everyone who'd enabled her behavior. By evening, news of her resignation had spread through both companies. John's phone buzzed constantly with messages from suppliers, contractors, and business associates, all suddenly eager to share stories about Amber's past misconduct. Emily texted again. Coming home tomorrow. Is it safe? Yes, he replied. Her access has been revoked, security system updated. This is still our home, not hers. He stood at his office window, watching the sun set over his construction site. Workers were finishing their day, honest labor coming to an honest end. The contrast with Amber's world of manipulation and deceit couldn't have been starker. His lawyer had already started divorce proceedings, armed with enough evidence to ensure Amber wouldn't get anywhere near Emily or his company. The professional fallout was just beginning, with regulatory investigations and potential criminal charges looming. The John's phone buzzed one final time, a message from Thomas. Just got word. SEC's formal investigation starts tomorrow. Want to see what else we can find before they freeze the accounts? Everything, John replied. Leave no stone unturned. He gathered his things, ready to head home to the house that would soon be free of Amber's toxic presence. Her world was falling apart, exactly as planned. But John knew better than to celebrate too early. After all, a cornered animal was often at its most dangerous. The SEC investigation hit Amber's company like a tsunami. Within a week of her forced resignation, federal agents had seized computers, files, and records from multiple executives. John watched the fallout from his office, where Thomas Chun provided regular updates on the expanding investigation. They found the offshore accounts, Thomas reported, spreading documents across John's desk. All of them. The forensic accountants are having a field day. John studied the papers. How deep does it go? Deeper than even we thought. Your wife wasn't just trading favors for contracts. She was running a full-scale corporate espionage operation, selling secrets to competitors, manipulating bids, orchestrating kickback schemes. Mike entered without knocking, his face urgent. Boss, you need to see this. Amber's at the house. The security camera feed on John's computer showed Amber's car parked crookedly in their driveway. She was trying to force her way through the front door, looking increasingly desperate. Call the police, John ordered, already heading for his truck. I'll handle this. When he arrived home, 2 police cars were already there. Amber stood on the front lawn, screaming into her phone, while officers watched cautiously. You can't do this to me, she yelled as John approached. I built this life. Everything here is mine. Mrs. Matthews, one officer stepped forward. You need to leave. You no longer have legal access to this property. Amber spun toward John, her designer outfit wrinkled, her makeup smeared. Tell them this is my house. Not anymore. John's voice was steady. The house is in my name. Always has been. Just like the company you try to steal from. Steal? She laughed hysterically. I made that company what it is. Without my connections, your connections? John cut in. You mean the executives who just turned over evidence against you? Or the suppliers you tried to pressure into falsifying documents? The officer moved closer. Ma'am, this is your final warning. Leave now, or we'll have to arrest you. Arrest me? Amber's voice rose to a shriek. Do you know who I am? I have had friends, John corrected. Amazing how quickly they disappeared when the SEC started asking questions. Her phone buzzed. The color drained from her face as she read the message. No, they can't. They're freezing my accounts? Standard procedure in fraud investigations. John watched her composure crumble. Your credit cards are next. Then the assets you thought you'd hidden. You planned this, she whispered, realization dawning. All of it, playing the quiet husband while you gathered evidence. I learned from the best, Amber. You taught me all about patience, about waiting for the right moment. His smile was cold. About karma. She lunged at him suddenly, manicured nails reaching for his face. The officers moved quickly, restraining her. Let me go. She struggled against their grip. He's ruining my life. Everything I built. You mean everything you stole? John's voice carried across the lawn. Everything you gained through manipulation and lies? Mrs. Matthews, the officer's voice was firm. You're under arrest for assault and trespassing. You have the right to remain silent. As they led her to the police car, John's phone buzzed with a text from Emily, watching from Jessica's window. You okay? I'm fine, he replied. Stay there until I call. Love you. Inside his house now. Truly, John found signs of Amber's attempted break-in. Scratches on the lock, a broken heel from her designer shoes on the doorstep. His phone rang. Thomas. They found the emails, Thomas reported without preamble. The ones about selling company secrets. FBI's getting involved now. Good. John moved through the house, noting items Amber had clearly tried to take during previous visits. What about her executive friends? Falling over themselves to cooperate. Richard from marketing provided recordings. Apparently, he'd been documenting everything for months, planning his own leverage. Forward it all to my lawyer. John paused in his home office, where a family photo still hung on the wall. Him, Emily, and Amber, all smiling for the camera. A lie captured in silver frame. Time to file for divorce. His phone buzzed again, a number he didn't recognize. John Matthews. Mr. Matthews, this is Agent Wilson with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. We'd like to discuss your wife's activities involving both your company and her former employer. Of course, I have files ready for you. After arranging a meeting with the FBI, John called Emily. Coast is clear. Come home. She arrived 20 minutes later, rushing into his arms. I saw them arrest her. Is it really over? Almost. He held his daughter tight. The investigations are just starting. It's going to get worse for her before it's done. Good. Emily's voice was firm. She deserves it. After everything she did, everything she tried to teach me, John led her to the kitchen, where they sat at the island, their spot for honest conversations. I need to ask you something important. The FBI will want to talk to you about what she said that night. About her methods. Emily straightened, showing that same strength he'd always admired. I'll tell them everything. Every word. She tried to turn me into her dad. Make me think that manipulation and lies were the only way to succeed. You're stronger than that. John squeezed her hand. You always have been. His phone buzzed yet again. Amber had been released on bail. Her message was predictably threatening. You'll regret this. Both of you. I still have friends who can. He deleted it mid-threat, then blocked her number. Let her rage. Her power was gone. Her carefully constructed facade shattered. The mighty executive was now just another white-collar criminal facing federal charges. Thomas sent a final update for the day. SEC's expanding their investigation to her previous employers. Pattern of behavior going back years. Want to see the preliminary findings? Tomorrow, John replied. Taking the night off. Having dinner with my daughter. As they prepared dinner together, something simple. Nothing like Amber's elaborate catered affairs. John felt a weight lifting. The demolition phase was nearly complete. Soon they could begin rebuilding, creating something honest and true from the ruins of Amber's lies. His phone buzzed one last time, his lawyer confirming the divorce filing. Given the evidence, she won't have grounds to contest. Emily's age makes custody straightforward. Want me to proceed? Yes, John typed back. End it. Through the kitchen window, he could see Amber's favorite sports car still parked crooked in the driveway, soon to be impounded as evidence. Another piece of her fabricated world, about to be stripped away. Emily caught his gaze. You did the right thing, Dad. Standing up to her, exposing everything. We both did. He smiled at his daughter, strong, honest, everything Amber had failed to corrupt. Now we rebuild. The right way. Outside, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Somewhere, Amber was probably calling in her last favors, trying to salvage something from the wreckage of her schemes. But her time was over. Karma, methodically planned and precisely executed, had finally caught up with her and John Matthews. The quiet builder she'd underestimated for so long had been its perfect instrument. The law offices of Morrison and Associates occupied the entire top floor of a downtown high-rise. John sat in the conference room beside his lawyer, Robert Morrison, watching Amber and her legal team across the polished mahogany table. The contrast between now and 6 weeks ago was striking. Her designer outfit couldn't hide the strain on her face, the slight tremor in her hands as she shuffled papers. Let's begin, Robert said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of 30 years in family law. Mrs. Matthews, you've reviewed our proposed settlements? Amber's lawyer, a sharp-featured woman in an expensive suit, leaned forward. My client finds these terms completely unacceptable. Mr. Matthews' demands are supported by extensive evidence of Mrs. Matthews' misconduct, Robert interrupted, opening a thick folder. Evidence that would be very interesting to a judge. This is blackmail. Amber snapped, her composure cracking. You can't. Actually, John spoke for the first time. It's karma. Everything in that folder is true. Isn't it, Amber? She met his gaze across the table, hatred burning in her eyes. You self-righteous bastard. You think you've won? I still have nothing. Robert cut in smoothly. Your assets are frozen, pending the federal investigation. Your professional reputation is destroyed. The only question is whether you want to add a messy public divorce to your problems. Amber's lawyer touched her arm, whispering something urgent. John watched his wife's face contort with rage and desperation. I want to speak to my husband alone, she demanded suddenly. Mrs. Matthews, I advise against, her lawyer began. 5 minutes, Amber insisted. Just 5 minutes. Robert looked at John, who nodded. The lawyers left, closing the door behind them. For a moment, silence filled the room. You've thought of everything, haven't you? Amber's voice dripped venom. The perfect revenge. This isn't revenge, Amber. It's consequences. John kept his voice level. Everything happening to you is the result of your own choices. She leaned forward, desperation creeping into her tone. We can fix this. Together. I still have contacts, people who owe me favors. You mean the executives who turned state's evidence against you? Or the board members who provided emails to the SEC? This isn't just about me. She slammed her hand on the table. What about Emily? You're destroying her mother's reputation, her future. Don't. John's voice turned to ice. Don't you dare use our daughter. Not after what you tried to teach her. I try to prepare her for reality. For how the world really works, your world, Amber. A world of lies, manipulation, and betrayal. John leaned back, studying her. But that world's gone now. Torn down piece by piece. Just like you try to tear down everyone around you. Amber's face twisted with rage. You think you're so moral, so righteous. But look what you did to me. Planned it all out, gathered evidence. Waited for the perfect moment to strike. Just like I would have done. The difference is I did it to protect our daughter. To show her that karma catches up to people like you. John stood slowly. You did everything for yourself. And now you're going to lose everything. By yourself. He moved toward the door, then paused. Sign the papers, Amber. Take the deal. Because what's in that folder? It's not even half of what I have on you. You're bluffing. But her voice wavered. Am I? Ask Richard from marketing. Or Stephen from legal. They've been very cooperative with the federal investigators. The door opened, and the lawyers returned. John watched as Amber's face cycled through rage, fear, and finally, defeat. I want to review the terms again, she told her lawyer, her voice hollow. Robert spread out the documents. Full custody of Emily to Mr. Matthews. The house remains his property. Mrs. Matthews retains her personal assets, what's left of them after the federal investigation. No alimony, no claims against Mr. Matthews' company. And in return, Amber's lawyer asked, Mr. Matthews doesn't submit certain evidence to the divorce court. Evidence that would be automatically forwarded to the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. Amber's hand shook as she reached for the pen. You've ruined me. No, Amber. John watched her sign away the life she'd built on lies. You did that yourself. One betrayal at a time. After the papers were signed and Amber had left with her lawyer, Robert gathered the documents. Clean and quick. Just like we planned. Nothing about this was quick, John replied. She spent years building her web of lies. I spent months gathering evidence to tear it down. His phone buzzed a text from Emily. How did it go? It's done, he wrote back. She signed everything. You're safe. The response was immediate, was never worried. Karma, right? John smiled, remembering all the times he'd taught Emily about consequences, about the importance of integrity. She'd learned those lessons well, better than Amber had ever understood. The FBI wants to meet again tomorrow, Robert said, checking his phone. They're particularly interested in those offshore accounts you found. I'll be there. John gathered his things, ready to leave the sterile conference room and its atmosphere of defeated ambitions. Any word on the criminal charges? Grand jury meets next week. Between the corporate fraud, the insider trading, and the evidence of blackmail. Robert shook his head. She'll be lucky to avoid prison time. Outside, the city stretched below them, buildings rising like monuments to ambition. Somewhere out there, Amber was probably already plotting, trying to salvage something from the wreckage of her schemes. But her time was over. Her power was gone. And karma, methodically planned and precisely executed, had finally balanced the scales that John's phone buzzed again. Thomas Chun with more evidence, more revelations about Amber's past misdeeds. The investigation was still expanding, uncovering years of manipulation and fraud, but that was for tomorrow. Tonight, he had dinner plans with Emily. Plans that didn't involve schemes or lies or manipulations. Just a father and daughter, building something honest from the ruins of Amber's destruction that it was time to start fresh. And this time, The foundation would be built on truth. The downtown federal building loomed over John as he arrived for another meeting with FBI investigators. In the lobby, he found Thomas Chun waiting with Agent Wilson, both surrounded by stacks of documents and laptops. Mr. Matthews, Agent Wilson gestured to a chair. We've made some interesting discoveries about your wife's past activities. Ex-wife, John corrected, settling into the seat. As of yesterday, Thomas opened his laptop. The investigation into her previous employers revealed a pattern. Every company she worked for experienced similar issues. Mysterious contract losses, information leaks, sudden executive departures. She'd been perfecting her technique for years, Agent Wilson added, spreading photos across the table. Each showed Amber at various corporate events, always surrounded by powerful men. Using the same methods, the same manipulation tactics. The difference, Thomas pointed at the most recent photos, was that she got careless. Started believing she was untouchable. John studied the timeline they'd assembled. Any word from her former contacts? That's actually why we called you in. Agent Wilson pulled out a recording device. We need you to hear something. The recording played Richard from marketing, speaking to federal investigators. His voice trembled with barely controlled panic. Mrs. Matthews had a system. She'd identify key executives, learn their weaknesses, family problems, financial troubles, whatever made them vulnerable. Then she'd strike, offering solutions that always came with strings attached. And you participated in this, an investigator's voice asked. I didn't have a choice. She had photos, recordings, evidence of things that would have destroyed my marriage, my career. But it wasn't just me. There were others, dozens maybe, all trapped in her web. Agent Wilson stopped the recording. We're finding similar statements from executives at every company she worked for. The pattern goes back over a decade. John's phone buzzed a text from Emily. Mom's trying to contact me through friends. Keeps saying she can explain everything. Block their numbers, he wrote back. She lost the right to explain anything. A knock at the door announced another agent, carrying more files. Sir, we've got confirmation on the Cayman accounts. Multiple transfers linked to contract awards. And something else. Recordings of her own, threatening various executives. She recorded her own blackmail attempts? Thomas asked incredulously. Insurance. John understood immediately. Leverage to keep them in line. Mr. Matthews, Agent Wilson leaned forward. Given this new evidence, we'd like you to wear a wire. Mrs. Matthews might be more candid if she thinks she's just talking to you. John considered the request. She's already suspicious of me. After the divorce, his phone interrupted Amber's new number, which he hadn't blocked yet. Speak of the devil. Put it on speaker, Agent Wilson urged, starting a recorder. John answered. What do you want, Amber? We need to talk. Her voice sounded strained, desperate. Face to face. No lawyers, no records. Just us. There is no us anymore. The divorce is final. This isn't about the divorce. She almost shouted. They're freezing everything, John. All my accounts, my connections. People won't even take my calls anymore. You have to help me. Like you helped all those executives you blackmailed? Or the companies you stole from? A pause. How did you? Who told you about that? Everyone's talking now, Amber. Richard, Stephen, all of them. Seems your insurance policy backfired. Those cowards, she hissed. After everything I did for them. You mean to them? Everything you did to them. Don't act so righteous. You're doing the exact same thing, using information for leverage, manipulating people. No, John's voice hardened. I'm exposing the truth. There's a difference. The truth. She laughed bitterly. The truth is you're enjoying this. Playing the wronged husband, the protective father, while systematically destroying everything I built. You built nothing, Amber. You just took from others, used them, and corrupted everything you touched. Even our daughter, Emily? Her voice changed, becoming wheedling. How is she? She won't answer my calls. Maybe you could stop. You lost the right to ask about her the moment you tried to teach her your tricks. To turn her into you. I try to teach her how to survive, how to succeed in a world that you helped create. A world of lies and manipulation. John shook his head, though she couldn't see it. That world's ending, Amber. And you're going down with it. The line went dead. Agent Wilson stopped the recording, looking satisfied. Perfect. Her attempts to justify her actions. The implicit admission of her methods. This'll play well in court. Thomas was already typing notes. Should we tell our other victims about this? The executive she blackmailed might be more willing to testify if they know she's lost her leverage. Do it, John decided. It's time everyone saw her for what she really is. His phone buzzed again, this time from Mike at the construction site. Boss, you need to see this. Amber's here, demanding to talk to you. She's not looking good. John showed the message to Agent Wilson. Looks like we might get that recorded conversation after all. The agent quickly prepared a wire, explaining the technical details while John thought about the confrontation to come. Amber was cornered, desperate. That made her dangerous, but then she'd always been dangerous. The difference was now everyone knew it. Ready? Agent Wilson asked, checking the wire one last time. John nodded, standing. Time to end this, once and for all. Outside the federal building, the city carried on, unaware of the drama unfolding in its midst. But soon, very soon, everyone would know the story of Amber Matthews and how karma, in the form of the quiet man she'd underestimated for so long, had finally caught up with her. John's truck pulled into his construction site as storm clouds gathered overhead. The weather seemed fitting dark, turbulent, promising violence. Mike waited by the site office, his expression grim. She's inside, Mike said quietly. Been ranting for 20 minutes. Security's keeping their distance, but she's getting more unstable. Any weapons? Threw her purse on the desk when she came in. Nothing obvious, but John touched the wire hidden under his shirt. Agent Wilson's voice came through his earpiece. We got eyes on all exits. You're clear to proceed. Inside the office, Amber paced like a caged animal. Her designer outfit was wrinkled, her makeup smeared. The perfectly crafted image she'd maintained for years had cracked completely. Finally, she snarled as John entered. Come to survey your handiwork? Proud of what you've done to me. You did this to yourself, Amber. John stayed by the door, watching her movements. Every lie, every manipulation, every betrayal, they were all your choices. My choices. She laughed hysterically. I chose to succeed, to take what I deserved. While you played in the dirt with your precious integrity, I was building something real. You built nothing. John's voice cut through her rant. You took from others, used them, destroyed them, just like you tried to destroy our daughter. Emily? Amber's face twisted. That ungrateful little... I try to teach her how the world really works, how to use what she has to get what she wants. You try to turn her into you. That was your biggest mistake. She grabbed a framed photo from his desk. Emily at her debate competition. Look at her. So much potential. Wasted on your small-minded morality. She could have been great, could have learned from my example. Your example? John stepped forward, his voice hard. You mean lying? Cheating? Sleeping your way through the corporate ladder while blackmailing everyone around you. It worked, didn't it? Amber's smile was savage. Every promotion, every contract, every luxury we enjoyed that came from my work, my methods. And now it's all gone. The money, the power, the connections, everything you built through lies is crumbling. She slammed the photo down, cracking the glass. Because you betrayed me. Gathered evidence, planned your little revenge. It's not revenge, Amber. It's justice. John moved to his desk, pressing a button on his computer. And you're not the only one who keeps records. The screen lit up with emails, photos, bank statements, years of evidence meticulously collected. Amber's face paled as she recognized some of the documents. How did you? Those were encrypted, hidden. I learned from you, remember? Watching, waiting, documenting everything. The difference is I did it to protect our daughter, not to destroy people for profit. Protect her? Amber's laugh held an edge of madness. From what? Success? Power? The ability to take what she wants? From becoming a monster like you. She lunged suddenly, manicured nails raking toward his face. John caught her wrist, holding her at bay as she screamed. I made you. Everything you have, everything you are. It's because of me. My connections, my influence, your lies. John's grip tightened slightly. Your manipulation. Your corruption. And now everyone knows. Richard, Stephen, the board members, the FBI, they're all talking. Every dark secret, every scheme, every person you used and discarded. They're weak. She tried to pull away, her designer bracelet sliding off her wrist. All of them crying about morality while taking what I offered. At least I was honest about my methods. Honest. John released her, watching her stumble back. Let's talk about honesty, Amber. About those offshore accounts, the falsified contracts, the executive meetings that were really blackmail sessions. Her face contorted. You have no proof. I have everything. He tapped his computer screen. Every transaction, every meeting, every threat you ever made. Did you really think no one was watching? That no one would ever stand up to you? Standing up to me? She grabbed her purse, rummaging frantically. You destroyed me. My career, my reputation, my life. Your lies destroyed you. I just exposed them. She pulled out her phone, fingers shaking as she tried to dial. I still have friends, people who owe me favors. Check the news, Amber. The FBI's investigation is public now. Everyone's running for cover, turning evidence to save themselves. Your friends are falling over each other to be the first to betray you. The phone slipped from her fingers, clattering on the desk. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Why? Her voice cracked. After all these years, why now? You know why? John's voice was steady. The night you came home drunk, bragging about your conquests, trying to teach our daughter your twisted version of success. That's when I knew you wouldn't stop. Couldn't stop. You'd keep corrupting everything you touched until someone stopped you. So you appointed yourself karma's instrument. Her laugh was bitter. The righteous husband, the protective father, systematically destroying everything I built. No, Amber, you destroyed it yourself. Every lie, every betrayal, every person you used, they all came back to haunt you. I just helped karma along. She moved toward him again, but slower now, her anger giving way to desperation. We can fix this. Together. I still have resources, hidden accounts, frozen by the FBI. John stepped back, maintaining distance, along with evidence of tax evasion, corporate espionage, and fraud going back years. It's over, Amber. It's not over until I say it's over. She grabbed a heavy paperweight from his desk, raising it threateningly. I won't let you take everything from me. The door burst open. FBI agents flooded in, weapons drawn. Agent Wilson's voice cut through the chaos. Mrs. Matthews, put it down. You're under arrest. The paperweight fell from her fingers as agents secured her. John watched as they recited her rights, placed her in handcuffs, designer bracelets replaced by cold steel. This isn't over, John, she called as they let her out. You'll regret this. Both of you will. Thunder drowned out her threats. Through his office window, John watched them lead her to a waiting vehicle. Rain began to fall, washing away the last traces of Amber's presence from his construction site. His phone buzzed. Emily. Dad? Mike just called. Is it true? Did they arrest her? It's done, he replied. She can't hurt anyone anymore. A pause, then good. Can I come home now? Yes, sweetheart. It's finally over. He stood at his window, watching the rain fall. Somewhere in the federal building, Amber would be realizing the full extent of her fall. Every lie exposed, every scheme unraveled, every person she'd used now turning against her. Karma had finally caught up with her. And John Matthews, the quiet builder she'd dismissed for so long, had been its perfect instrument. 3 months after Amber's arrest, John sat in the federal courthouse, watching his ex-wife's world officially crumble. The judge's voice echoed through the packed courtroom as he read out the charges. Corporate fraud, blackmail, financial crimes spanning years of calculated destruction. Amber sat at the defendant's table, her designer outfit replaced by something notably more modest. Her lawyer had advised against her usual power suits, trying to project humility. It didn't work. Even now, facing years in prison, her eyes burned with defiance and barely contained rage. The evidence presented in this case, the judge continued, shows a pattern of deliberate manipulation and fraud that spans more than a decade. Mrs. Matthews used her position of authority to blackmail colleagues, steal from employers, and corrupt the very foundations of corporate trust. John felt Emily's hand tighten in his. She'd insisted on being here, on watching the final act of her mother's downfall. At 18, she showed more strength than Amber had ever possessed. Before I pronounced sentence, the judge looked directly at Amber. Would you like to make a statement? Amber stood, her practiced poise cracking around the edges. Your Honor, I've been made a scapegoat. Everything I did was standard practice in corporate America. The only difference is I was better at it than most. These men who testified against me, they were willing participants. They benefited from our arrangements. And now they pretend to be victims? The judge's expression hardened. Mrs. Matthews, you show no remorse for your actions. No understanding of the lives you've damaged. Damaged? Amber's laugh held an edge of hysteria. I made them successful. Every man who testified against me owes his position to my help. And my husband, she turned, pointing at John, he's the worst of all, pretending to be moral while methodically destroying everything I built. Mrs. Matthews, her lawyer, tried to stop her, but she shrugged off his hand. You want to talk about damage? She was almost shouting now. Look at what he's done. Turned my own daughter against me, exposed private dealings, destroyed years of careful work. That's enough. The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. Mrs. Matthews, you've just demonstrated exactly why this court must take severe action. You remain convinced that your criminal behavior was justified, that your victims should be grateful for your manipulation. Emily leaned closer to John, whispering, she still doesn't get it, does she? She never will, John replied softly. That's why this had to happen. The judge shuffled his papers, his expression grave. Given the extent of your crimes, the number of victims, and your complete lack of remorse, this court sentences you to 15 years in federal prison. Additionally, you are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $12 million to the companies and individuals you defrauded. Amber's face went white. 15 years? You can't. I can, and I have. The judge's voice was final. Perhaps during your incarceration, you'll learn what your husband and daughter already understand. That true success comes from integrity, not manipulation. As federal marshals led Amber away, she turned one last time. John, you can't let them do this. After everything goodbye, Amber. John's voice carried clearly through the courtroom. Emily was right. You never did understand what real strength looks like. Outside the courthouse, reporters clustered with cameras and microphones. John guided Emily through them, ignoring questions about the corporate Black Widow, as the media had dubbed Amber. Mr. Matthews, one reporter broke through. Your ex-wife claims you orchestrated her downfall. Any response? John paused, looking at the camera. Amber orchestrated her own downfall. Every choice she made, every person she hurt, it all caught up with her. That's not orchestration. That's karma. In his truck away from the media circus, Emily finally spoke. Dad, what happens now? Now. John started the engine. Now we build something new. Something honest. I got my college acceptance letter yesterday, she said quietly. Full scholarship. Pride swelled in John's chest. Engineering program? Yes. They were especially impressed by my essay about learning integrity from watching you build things that last. They drove in comfortable silence for a while, passing the construction site where it had all started to unravel. New buildings rose from solid foundations, straight and true. Mr. Chun called, Emily mentioned, said Mom's other victims are filing civil suits. Let them. She hid money in dozens of accounts. They deserve to get it back. At home, their home, now free from Amber's toxic presence. They found Mike waiting with a stack of papers. New contract proposals, boss. And, he hesitated, the last of Mrs. Matthews' things from the storage unit. Donation centers waiting. Give it all away, John decided. Let someone else benefit from her materialism. Later that evening, as sunset painted the sky in shades of possibility, John and Emily sat at their kitchen island. No fancy dinner parties, no political maneuvering, just father and daughter, sharing a simple meal and honest conversation. You know what's weird? Emily said, pushing her plate aside. I feel lighter. like her shadows finally gone. It is. John reached across the counter, squeezing her hand. You never needed her kind of success. You've got something better. What's that? Integrity. Real strength. The kind that builds things instead of destroying them. His phone buzzed a message from Agent Wilson. More of Amber's victims coming forward. More evidence of her past crimes surfacing. Her 15-year sentence might extend as new charges emerged. They found 3 more offshore accounts, he told Emily. She'll never touch that money now. It'll all go to restitution. Emily nodded, then smiled slowly. Dad, remember what you always said about foundations. Build them right, or don't build at all. We're finally building right, aren't we? John looked at his daughter, strong, honest, everything Amber had failed to corrupt, and felt a deep sense of peace. Yes, sweetheart, we are. Outside, the city lights began to twinkle, each one a star in their new universe. Somewhere in a federal facility, Amber faced her first night of many behind bars. Her empire of lies finally demolished, but here, in this kitchen, a father and daughter were building something stronger than any empire. Something based on truth, on integrity, on the simple power of doing what's right, and that, John knew, was the greatest karma of all.